Bakeru is the 3D platformer that released on September 3rd, 2024 for the price of $39.99. It released on the PC, specifically Steam, and the Nintendo Switch, and is published by Spike Chunsoft, which is probably best known for the Danganronpa franchise. But it's developed by Good Feel Company, which you may actually know from another couple of games, Yoshi's Woolly World and Princess Peach Showtime. Yeah, they've been part of some of Nintendo's Star Characters spin-off games, but now they are developing their own game that's strongly based in Japanese culture. So, can it soar to the heights of those other games while bringing something truly unique? Or will it fade without that star power to lift it up? Let's find out, shall we? You play as Bakeru, a young member of the Tanuki clan, who are actual Tanukis, and whose clan is approached by Isun, who warns of a big baddie who's mind-controlling some of the big heroes of the area, and is trying to take over Japan, of course. Bakeru, who isn't exactly the most upstanding hero at the start of the journey, is told to take down the evil by his grandfather. And that's where the adventure begins. And I'll start with what you're probably here for: the gameplay. Bakeru is styled along the lines of 3D platformers of the N64 and PS1 era, being directly compared to games like Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, due to the flavoring of Japanese culture within both of the game's bones. But it does also take influence from games like Mario Odyssey and 3D hack-and-slash games. There's a variety of levels, but the platforming-focused ones usually follow a distinct goal: destroy several lanterns to unlock the drum at the end of the level to complete it. There are usually 5 to 6 lanterns in a level, despite only needing 3 to unlock in the end, so you have some flexibility if you miss one or two. With that said, it's not open world. The game does well in keeping you along a main path with its level design for the most part, while still allowing a little bit of exploration to find collectibles, but more on those later. Bakeru's main tool of choice is his taiko, aka drum, and its drumsticks, which I believe are referred to as bachi. The flavor around this is that it dispels demons with its hits, and that seems to translate to smashing the bachi over the enemy's head. I mean, it's a form of banishment to an extent. Each of the bumpers on the controller will act as a specific hand attack, so left bumper for a left hand attack, right for a right-handed attack. And as you go through the game, you will get more powers, such as being able to dash attack with them, or a multi-hit attack as you go. In addition, you will also get defensive options in your drum, which when timing right can parry or block damage, or even reflect bullets back at enemies with a very reasonable window to reflect it in. You also have a roll to get out of dangerous spots as well, so if you are arguing with the Dark Souls versus Bloodborne type of defense, you have both. Enemies will give you a reasonable range of attack types to deal with, despite enemies usually sticking with 1 to 3 patterns. And I found that the game did well in balancing an ease of combat that punished you for being too reckless, but still accessible to new and younger players to the genre. Now, as you go along, you will face big bosses of figures of Japanese folklore, and as you do this, you will be granted powers that you can change form thanks to a power meter and enemy drops. These forms are influenced by those bosses, and range from a quick attack succession fisherman to a big brooding sumo who can hit hard. They aren't really necessary to get you through the game per se, but will make certain enemies and sequences easier if you pull them out at the right time, as long as you got the power to use them. I will admit though that of the powers that were there, I didn't use the fisherman one that often. The gun one and the sumo one really did the job in terms of dealing with certain enemies that I really wanted to pull them out in, and I kept on forgetting about it. I don't know why. Now, the thing to understand about Bakeru is that if you're expecting a difficult and peril-filled journey that will push you to the edge of your gaming prowess in platformers and combat, well, you could probably just close this review right now. because that's not what Bakeru is, and it's not trying to be. But that doesn't mean there isn't a lot to enjoy here, and it really does capture that sort of Mario 3D platformer essence in terms of the whimsy / wonder that you get just going through this world. A lot of that will be captured in the presentation portion of this review when it comes to the immersion and flavor of the world. But a good example of the alternative flavor of enjoyment comes in things like the collectibles. In most levels, you can find 3 collectible souvenirs, with one of them usually being a pendant that indicates which prefecture the level is in, aka area in Japan, and 2 other themed ones that could be anywhere from a wooden doll to a staple food of the area. But in addition to that, there are 5 hidden fact boys, I'll call them. Finding them, they will take you to a random fact that's usually related to Japan or the area that you are in, which most of them are inherently interesting, enough so that you sort of want to find the next one right away and just learn a little bit more. Now, some of you may pause and say, okay, finding facts is one of the best things about this game, but it also helps into giving you the reasons for exploration into this world, and the level design really complements it. These little guys are hidden in places sometimes that are obvious, or sometimes are in places that you would expect, certain people to be. But sometimes they're a little bit out of the way, but it never hits the point of frustration with them. It isn't a point where you're like scratching your head like, oh god, where is this 4th fact boy? I know that it has to be in this certain area. You're not frustrated. And that usually is a good sign. It hits that point of, okay, it's getting me to explore, but it's not driving me up the wall. It also helps that later in the game, you get the ability to find hidden tanukis in a sort of prop hunt sort of situation. They'll be in the level hidden as an object, and will have some distinguishing feature that you can see if you look closely, such as the tail popping out, or moving ever so slightly if you stare at them. These tanukis are cleverly placed, and can sometimes get you scratching your head, but really did freshen up the gameplay as things went along, especially replaying levels, and kept you looking and exploring this lovely world. The game also mixes in a few different level types for more variety, such as simple racing segments, auto-scrolling levels, or even mech fights. None of these are anything outstanding or new to the genre. The mechanics are rather simple in most cases, but it also helps to break things up. Granted, I wanted a little bit more out of them in the big picture, again, partly due to difficulty, but I also wanted a little bit more out of the mech sections because I'm dying for a good one-on-one mech fighting game, so I may be expecting too much from it. Now, more than normal, because I was a little bit later on this review, I got to see some more big criticisms from Steam reviews and other types of reviews on the game. And one of the big ones that I keep on seeing that is recurring is that the game is repetitive, that you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, especially in combat. And here's the thing, it's true and it's not. Let me explain. I've made it clear at this point in the review that the game definitely focuses more on exploration, finding collectibles, moving around in the environment and seeing everything in it, and not necessarily being a straight-up platforming challenge. In fact, many of the platforming sections are rather easy, and you don't have a series of moves like a long jump or a double jump, triple jump combo like you'd see in Mario Odyssey. Despite the fact that you have that weird change of direction jump here, that was a little bit weird, it never teaches you it. Now, sure, you have hazard sections you have to move carefully in so that you don't touch lava or don't fall off a cliff, but many of them don't require massive skill or mastery of certain elements. It's really about just seeing the hazard and moving appropriately with your base movement. But the fact of the matter is that the level variety ends up saving it in that case. The thing is that the game keeps on changing things up in terms of perspective, like going around a column over and over again. or going on a roller coaster ride and just enjoying the different perspective. The fact is, it's a little bit harder to hit these guys because of the camera angle. You don't know exactly where they are. You have to use the shadows. And that little change does a lot. The thing is that this game will have a little bit of frustration at points. Like, yeah, why am I not able to jump over this? But the thing is that those little moments don't get overshadowed by the entire experience. And yes, if you sit here and play the game in one big session where you're doing some repetition, because naturally there's going to be some repetition, you're probably not going to enjoy the game as much. But if you play it an hour here, an hour there, you are going to really feel the variety over time. And it's a kind of game that you want to go back to and see those little hints, see those little elements that make the game unique. So yes, I understand that some people think the gameplay is repetitive or not as good as some other difficult platformers, but that's not what it's going for. And the fact of the matter is, it does the job rather well, especially for a younger audience or people who don't just sit there and play it in one session. Moving on from the gameplay, you should realize that when it comes to the visuals of this presentation, this isn't something that Bakeru was skimping on. Graphical fidelity is pushed hard left and right, especially by certain people on Twitter, but I will always argue that art style and direction will make a game more timeless and more memorable in the end. And that may be Bakeru's greatest strength when pairing it with Japanese culture. Let me be clear, the design of enemies, vehicles, and even the littlest of elements are things that I could talk about hours upon hours on this game. If you've watched anime, especially in the 90s, you'll understand that the enemy designs were really just taken from the pop culture of Japan and its tropes. I mean, this enemy wiping the floor, you've seen it in animes where, the students are wiping the floor because that's what they do. The smashing the watermelon during a summer festival enemy. I mean, if I look at every enemy in this game, there's some thought not only put into the design and what they emphasize on it, but actually making it fit with the attacks that they are pulling off as well. It makes sense in the world. And that does go a long way of immersing you in it. But the thing is, don't think this is going to feel Japanese and nothing else in terms of the enemies and environments, although they're heavily influenced by them. The environments, while having those flavors, hit a wide gambit of locations that keep the variety up, and plays to the cartoonish nature of the game. A giant Japanese-type castle that hits the heavens and how tall it is? Sure. A series of buildings along a river that feels almost Yakuza-like in a sense. I don't know why I think Yakuza specifically, but that's what I thought. Yeah, a forest that seems to be holding a festival occurring within it. Yeah, the game has all of those, and each level does a great job of feeling connected to the others without being too much of a copy of the other ones. I also love the fact that the game isn't afraid to use color, but doesn't overcomplicate the design elements while doing it. If you look around, you'll see the entire color wheel used around the environment, allowing banners to pop out of walls, but it usually keeps the shades of these colors relatively solid when used, which means that the simple, cartoonish designs are able to usually be seen at almost every angle rather clearly. That's at least for like 98% of the game. Every once in a while, there is an odd color combination that can make things hard to read, but it still somehow works despite that. It's the little touches here, especially when dealing with animations, that really pushes the presentation to the next level. Things like a running river having these Wi-Fi-like symbols to represent the flow. It really works to capture the movement and to be visually appetizing. It's how an enemy will disappear in an animation flourish, or how the movement in general seems to pop out of screen, like those enemies pushing the cart and running around you, going in and out of these sort of barn-like situations. Can the screen get messy at times? It can with a lot of enemies and dropped items, but I never felt like I was squinting to see the action or struggling to see things in general. Unless the game wanted me to. White enemies in a snow-like environment that has a natural fog in a blizzard-like environment, of course they are a little hard to see. It's white on white, and I'm pretty sure that's the design, and it does it well. Moving on to the sound design, it's strong. The smash of the bocce against wood grabs my attention when breaking a crate, and the sound is clear and decisive, yet easily be able to distinguish it from other sounds around it. Like hitting this gear over and over again, it makes a pleasing metal pang to it, to the point where I don't mind hitting it repetitively, even if I've already gotten it into position and don't need to. It's just hypnotic in a sense. I mean, that's what you want. These are drumsticks, so everything you hit you will want a natural beat to. And for the most part, Bakeru gets that right with your weapons. And for 98% of the sounds, they do a great job of giving you information that you may not immediately register with your eyes. The pop of an enemy dying or something being broken tells you all you need to know, and you're never questioning what happens. Did I actually break that box? Did I actually kill that enemy? That's not going to be the case here. Even beyond the flair of being realistic or cartoonish, the sound design here complements the gameplay at most turns. Most. The one thing I will say is that you will have to get used to Bakeru and his voice, because he will grunt and say things while he attacks and moves, which isn't unheard in the genre. Again, the Mario idea. And when he's jumping or when he's moving, it works a lot. But when you're dealing rapid attacks, especially with some of the forms here, he can get a little annoying. Look, just listen to the sound design yourself, and you can hear what I'm talking about. Finally, the music. Look, I said that this game has been bathed in Japanese culture. Do I really need to repeat that here? I'm almost positive that some odd instruments that are very specific to Asian culture are here, like the sangen. But man, does the game capture the energy of a hero's journey extremely well. Action parts are filled with, crescendos that make sense, and it just has that feel of not necessarily a Mario per se, but an alternative Mario, a Japanese Mario, even though Mario is Japanese. Look, it's very good. Is it music that I would listen to outside the game? No, but it's probably because it's very specific to, well, enhancing the game and its feelings. So take a listen, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. As for the story, with this being a 3D platformer, you may not expect that much from it. And to be honest, I wasn't either. Granted, it's nothing too crazy to write home about, it's the hero's journey story for Bakeru, but I will say that there's a good flavor to it thanks to it being based in Japan and trying to work off of Japanese folklore. These characters you come across, a good amount of them are real. Well, real in a sense. They're figures in Japanese history and textbooks and folklore, and to be honest, may spark you to go read about those characters beyond this game, because those stories are interesting and are worth reading. The game does adapt them well, and gives some of these characters a little personality, but not enough to be really memorable in the end. I mean, the thing is that there are a few jokes thrown in, and I wanted to see more of these characters interact, because when they do, it usually works rather well. It's lighthearted a lot of the time, but there's a good sense of humor and characterization, and it really does, feel like sort of like a 90s morning cartoon at times, with that sort of oh, everybody's laughing, but yeah, we're gonna get the job done kind of attitude. I do wonder if maybe some content was cut towards the end, because while you do get some characterization of some of the characters that you find, especially in the middle of the game, towards the end, you get a couple of characters who are just sort of rushed through even though they're supposedly important, and, well, it truly feels like they wanted to do more with it. Call it a hunch, but it just feels like they put some effort into them, and it just didn't work out the way that they wanted it to. But overall, a reasonable story. Overall, Bakeru is a lovely 3D platformer that may not be the most difficult of games out there, but takes you through a wide array of colorful levels, fun enemies, and all really draped in the flavor of Japanese folklore and pageantry. That world keeps you looking at not only its lovely presentation, but looking for that next little factoid. And although there is some repetition, you'll see that in a lot of 3D platformers in the big picture, and Bakeru does enough to change things up and keep you playing without getting too bored, especially if you don't play long sessions, play the game all at once. While it doesn't hit the tier 1 of 3D platformers like Demon Turf and A Hat in Time, it's not that far off from it, and it's definitely worth playing, coming in at an 87 out of 100, making it a solid buy, unless you're hurting for cash. But that doesn't take into account my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective element of games and tries to match a game to you. If you fall into one of the following categories on screen, add or subtract that score to the main score. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. As you can see, there's a wide range of enhancers here, and the fact of the matter is, there are certain people who will absolutely love this game, especially of a younger demographic, or people who are really just interested in Japan and Japanese culture and symbolism. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's why the game was actually made in the first place. It originally came out in Japan first, and it is sort of one of those games where you can sort of give it to your kid and just, oh hey, learn about your culture, learn about what's going on in folklore and things like that. It's one of those games that does well in showing off, well, the country as a whole. Now, this coming from the American does seem a little bit weird, but you know what I mean. Anyway, that's it for this review. If you want more content like this, hit that subscribe button. And if you like this video, like it and share it with a friend or somebody who you think would enjoy this type of 3D platformer. As to what's coming up on the channel, yeah, I know there was a big break in terms of reviews there, but I also got hit by a hurricane during that time, so give me a little bit of a break. Next review will most likely, don't hold me to this, but it'll most likely be Bloomtown. I really enjoyed my first session of that on Twitch, and the fact is I've sort of been thinking about going back to it, so I'll probably do that. Usually I try to do games that are upcoming, But I'm also getting ready for my end of the year list because, well, I want to get started on it now because I don't want to have that rush at the end of the year. There's a whole wedding thing planning for, and I really need to get more on that. Anyway, that's it for this review. And as always, keep on gaming.